Right, good afternoon. It's obviously what we used to call the graveyard slot in the training business, and I'm sure this isn't the most interesting presentation on the schedule today, but my name's David Parrott. I'm going to talk today a little bit about site builders and just talk about, I think there's quite a lot of discussion in the community at the moment. I know that that WebCheck has been sort of tasked with trying to find out why more people aren't starting to build websites in Drupal 8, which kind of plays quite nicely into what I want to talk about today. So I've got a few slides. It may end up, it's not necessarily a script, but I'll go through it and just, I'm happy to take questions as we go along rather than stopping at the end. The only thing is, if you're going to ask a question, I'm going to ask you to talk into a microphone so that it can be part of the recording that they're doing of this session. So some stuff I want to talk about. Who am I? What is a site builder? Because I think that's an important thing to understand, at least in the context of what I want to talk about. What's awesome in Drupal 8? What's awesome for site builders? And what's not? So first, me. I trained as an economist, but really, and an accountant at the same time, which was really fun, only because I didn't want to be seen as that IT nerd. It was a while ago, and IT really wasn't cool at that time. Why I chose accounting economics, I'm not quite sure, as an alternative to that. I'm from New Zealand, but I spent a lot of time overseas working in various subjects, or jobs, but basically IT training, a lot of online learning. I was there in some of the early days for that. I'm back in New Zealand for the last 10 years. I built my first website in 2001 that was kind of coding back then. First looked at Drupal in 2006, and I've been basically building Drupal websites for customers in Tauranga, where I live, or the Mount, since 2013. Well, I've been doing it alongside other work for a while before that. My Drupal experience, I kind of looked at 4.7 in 2006 and just couldn't figure out what to do with it. But I started working with it properly in 2007 when Drupal 5 came out, and basically kept up about a year behind 6 and 7. And as it turns out, kind of a year and a half, 2 years behind Drupal 8. And this is my fourth DrupalSouth. So I thought I would just talk a little bit about what I promised in this presentation. I wrote this in a fit of frustration about 3 months ago because I'd been trying to do something in Drupal 8 and it just wasn't working. And I thought, if I'm a site builder, I just can't work with it yet. So I wrote this on my phone, sent it off, and I didn't see it again until a week ago. So I had to refresh my memory. But essentially, I think the question I asked there is Drupal 8 now for developers only? Can you, as a person who might just build a website for a small client in Drupal 8, can you do that in Drupal 8, and do you even want to? And then if you are going to do that, then just talk about some of the things that you might need to think about if you're going to do it. So the basic premise from my point of view is this. Drupal 8's the best CMS on the planet. It's an amazing platform that's getting better all the time, and it's worth investing your time to learn thanks to the new release cycle, which is now every 6 months, which I think is quite neat. In some respects, Drupal 7 is still easier to work with, but when you start playing with Drupal 8, it's just like, oh, this is really cool, most of the time. Making the switch to Drupal 8 as a site builder is not an easy decision to make, because it's going to take, as somebody doing what I do, takes a lot of time, a lot of frustration, a lot of, oh, this bit isn't ready yet. What am I going to do instead? Do I stop? Do I work around it? Do I find some other method of doing this? Or do I just leave it and come back in 3 months' time? There's been a bit of that for me in my Drupal 8 journey so far. I think what you need to do is think about your skill level, your ability to learn, and your willingness to burn some time during the transition from 7 to 8. And also, is the functionality you want in Drupal 8 yet? So, some challenges that Drupal 8 presents to site builders. Not everything's ready. It's still bleeding on the edges a little bit, which is a fact. It's not a complaint. It's just the reality that I'm experiencing. Modules are uninstalled, not disabled, for example. So you can't do it from the UI anymore. So immediately, as a site builder, and bear in mind, site builders are probably spending most of their time in the UI, and they're not getting into the terminal. Well, what do I do now, says the site builder. I'm stuck. Symfony if you knew anything as a site builder about hacking modules together, then you just forgot, you need to forget all that now because Symfony is so different, which is the same problem everyone who's working with any code in Drupal has hit. But for site builders, they probably have just picked up enough to get by, and now that's not much use to them at all. The 6-monthly curveball release can throw curveballs. I experienced one just the other day with Composer. If you're using 8.4, you now have to use Composer. If you're trying to use Drush and you do Drush DL, you get a lovely message like this, saying that it's been deprecated. Please build your site using Composer. Oh, okay. But in the meantime, you could go and get this module called Composer Generate. And I guess this is a Drupal version, Drush version problem, because that module is only available for Drupal 7. So as a site builder, I'm like, huh? Now, I went off and I figured out Composer enough to get through that, but a lot of people will hit that and go, okay, I'm out of here. And there is a GUI being worked on for Composer that will work within Drupal. I haven't tried it. I've got no idea how ready it is. But if I was a site builder who didn't spend a lot of time in the command line, then I'd be going, okay, stick with Drupal 7 for a while. And I think that is part of the problem that WebCheck's hitting with some of the adoption challenges they've got around Drupal 8 now. So I've talked a bit about site builders so far. Let's talk about what they are. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone is. I was talking to somebody this morning, and we all do a bit of everything, I think. You know, whether you're a full-on developer, back-end developer, front-end developer, database developer, you end up in the UI doing stuff from time to time. But if you know the database or you know code, then you kind of get to step away and say, well, I couldn't do it in the UI, so I'll just go and fix it over here. But as a site builder, you probably aren't somebody who's going to be able to do that. So you'll build what you can with what's in the site, in core or what's in Contrib, but after you kind of hit a wall at some point. And in Drupal 7, there are so many core modules where you can work around a lot of the things that you can't do without coding, but with Drupal 8, that's a little harder. So a developer, as I just kind of intimated, was they'll do what they can with what's in the UI and then go custom when they have to. Or as I've experienced taking over a couple of websites built by developers, not site builders, they'll go, oh, I'm not going to bother with that module over there that does that thing. I'll just write my own bit. And you end up with custom code sort of scattered through the site. And as a site builder, I'm thinking, well, hang on, you didn't need that code. That was views, or there were ways that you could do that really easily with Contrib. I've got another take on it, just in case that's not enough for you. So to me, a site builder is somebody who builds, maintains Drupal sites, mostly by installing Drupal, some Contrib modules, a theme, and then configuring them at a base level. They rely heavily on Contrib to make feature-rich sites, but they generally don't have the ability to fix problems or fill gaps with custom code. They probably, not always, but often live in a cPanel environment where your ability to control the environment, change PHP settings or do stuff like install extra caching modules or whatever, you may not have that ability. You might get to the terminal, use a bit of Drush, maybe you probably write some front-end CSS occasionally, and maybe some JavaScript. But you're probably doing that by going and finding some code somewhere, and we're all guilty of it, or not guilty, but we all do it. We go and find a bit of code and we'll put in a custom module that does a thing, or a theme function that does a thing that we just needed to fix the problem there and then. But site builders, that's probably all they ever get to do. Now, I suppose the question you might ask is, well, who cares? You know, I'm not a site builder, so... and I think there's probably a self-selecting group, first in this room, who are kind of interested to know what site builders go through, or they are. To just see a show of hands, how many people would consider themselves a site builder in that definition? A few hands? Cool. Okay, welcome. But a lot of other people are going, well, I don't need to worry about it because I can solve my problems and it's easy to do. The way that I do it. I don't need to think about considerations for site builders. But I worry for Drupal, the platform, and the community when site builders don't get brought along, because if you have to be a developer to do anything with it, then immediately you lose sort of an interface in the community with people who are actually using it like customers will use it, but they're actually building the functionality to begin with. And those are the people who are probably more aware of the customer UI. You're going to build a site, give it to a site editor. What's it going to be like for that site editor? And I've seen some disastrous user experiences for content managers in Drupal, written by developers, because they didn't really have to play with the UI all that much, and so they didn't. And they didn't think about what it was going to be like using it on a day-to-day basis. So that's sort of my, I guess, the end of soapbox there. I think it's important for site builders to step up, but also to be taken along as well. So what's great about Drupal 8 from a site builder perspective, or in general? Well, there's lots of cool new stuff. Views is in core, of course, and for the most part, if you used views before, it's still views. There are some tweaks and differences, but essentially, if you know it there, you know it now. Media's in core as of 8.4, which I think is pretty good, and I'm looking forward to 8.5 and what else that will bring. Performance. Now, I was at the last session down here where they talked about caching and that have specific use case, and it was an edge case, I think, as far as I'm concerned. But for me, I've found working with Drupal 8 faster so far, but then I guess I'm not installing as many contrib modules into my base site build as I did with Drupal 7, so of course, yes, it's faster. However, the caching, I'm really looking forward to giving that a bit of a spin, because it does sound like what Drupal 8's doing with caching is going to make it appear faster, even if it isn't always faster. Workflows in core. Now, I've always thought workbench moderation, I think it was awesome. Absolutely amazing, but I could never find a customer who could be bothered with it. Now, I think it's great that workflow's in core now, and workflow is initially workbench moderation, but it opens up the potential for other things, and I love that. The potential to build workflows into Drupal that meet specific customer requirements just makes it a heck of a lot more powerful, even if I'm not going to use the moderation component of it very much. Configuration management, it's a huge part of Drupal 8, and if you don't get this, then as a site builder, you're kind of toast, I think. But I played with it a little bit. It does seem that I'm going to need features to do what I want to do with it. I've tried exporting a view and importing a view, and lots of complaints, and no bypass validation if you don't like this, which you could do with views before. But I worked my way through it, and I now know what I do next. But yeah, so that's pretty neat. Better multilingual support. Has anyone here built a multilingual site in D7? Was it fun? Oh man, I've got one site at the moment, and it's mostly okay unless you've got field collection already. Has anyone experienced that? Field collection doesn't translate, it just empties fields. It doesn't change the database, it just doesn't read the fields anymore. So, whoa. So you end up having to reload content into your field collections. So that's Drupal 7. I'm hoping Drupal 8's a little better than that. And web services. Web services, of course, are key, as we know from some of what we heard in the keynote this morning. And the 6 monthly point releases. Now, I think that's a double-edged sword. The message you saw earlier about Drush no longer working with downloading modules in 8.4. As site builders, we kind of don't want to feel like there's too many of these curveballs still to come, although I think that is probably now a bit of a reality in Drupal 8. Some more cool stuff, I'll skip through this. CK editors in core, so no more configuration hassle every time you build a site. We have to go and set it up again. Webform 5, who's used Webform 5? So it was YAML form.
Yeah, it was YAML, and it became Webform.
Now it's Webform, so it's replaced. They haven't ported Webform 4, we've got Webform 5, and for my money, it actually is better than Webform 4 was in terms of what I can do with it. It's amazing, and I can see the potential for it to be so much greater as well. And it's still only beta 23 or something. I don't know when a release is coming, but it's stable enough to use now. Blocks got a whole lot better. Block layouts didn't change it a heck of a lot, other than you can now put put the same block in multiple times. Blocks can be fieldable, and you can have custom block types, and you can even publish them in the next release, which I thought was a pretty nice idea, just to be able to say, turn off a block temporarily. In-place editing, I'm not convinced by this, but I have lost at least one job to somebody who was showing off Concrete 5 going, look, you can click here and edit. And that actually is what lost me that particular project. They regretted it later, but it was too late for me. But so yeah, that's there. Twig, also huge. Massive change if you're a front-end developer. I never did a heck of a lot of PHP template work, so I'm not overly troubled by that, but some site builders who do spend a bit of time in the front end might have been concerned. Commerce 2 got released just in time for DrupalCon Vienna. Has anyone tried that, or does anyone work with Commerce? Either version? Yeah, one person? Okay. Commerce 2 is a big step up. It's got a long way, I think. It's probably 6 months to a year before it's really usable in a full production environment, although I think you can do stuff with it out of the box. A lot of stuff is now core within Commerce. And Metatag. Metatag seems to be eating a lot of other modules. So there was Site Verify and Page Title, and these used to be go-tos for me, and they're in Metatag now. Metatag just seems to get more and more sub-modules. You could probably spend a day just learning everything you need to learn about Metatag, but it's great and it works. So that's some of the cool stuff, and if you're working in Drupal 8 and you're a site builder, then at least some of those things matter to you. But what's not to love? This is the stuff that scares site builders. It's still not perfect, so it's a new architecture, new tools, and a new learning curve. There's no migration path really, and it's migration rather than upgrade now, but getting from Drupal 6 to Drupal 7, I'm not going to even try with most of my sites, even when they get it right. And I'm someone who lives in feeds and does some incredible stuff with feeds, but I just feel like I'm not quite sure I want to go down that route. I'd almost rather, for the small sites that I look after, just start another one. And that was kind of where I got to with Drupal 7 from Drupal 6 as well. I tried a couple of sites, and yeah, it's not always that much fun, unless you're talking a lot of content. Some key modules aren't yet fully ported, and again, I'll go back to what WebChick's been finding out. These are some of the things that have been stopping people. So feed still isn't ready. Now, I know that there was supposed to be some focus on it at the code sprint yesterday. Did anyone go to that? Does anyone know what happened? I saw no commits in the issue queue. Feeds is big for me. I've just done 2 7 sites that I would have done in 8 if feeds had been ready. And one of them is one which takes a real estate feed, which has got literally hundreds of fields to map into different node types. Would have loved to have done it in 8, but I just couldn't take it. It wasn't ready. Rules is another one I used to rely on quite heavily. It's still not ready. And panels is there. Now, somebody asked me earlier, panels or display suite or block layout or something else, what do people do? Display suite?
Panels and display suite.
Panels and display suite? That it? Context? Okay. I've not used that. I've played a bit with display suite. I'm a panels person. I love what Panels 7 could do. And not having everything that was in Panels 7 in Panels 8 has held me back. And I've just kind of got over that a little bit now and just got on with it. It works. But the key thing for me is that you can't control the visibility of pane variants, blocks if you like, based on fields. I used to say, well, do you want to use this thing or this thing? Tick this box and I'll either use that one or that one. And just a Boolean field could be used as a condition for the visibility of a pane, and that's not there at the moment. There's a patch in progress, but it's not ready yet. And just general growing pains, potholes and rough edges. And my personal experience is that I go to do something and then something breaks. And I have to decide, do I just not do that, or do I try and figure it out, because I do want this as part of my workflow as a site builder going forward, or do I come back later? And that's the hard part. And occasionally, like with panels, it kind of stopped me. I went back to doing Drupal 7 for a bit, and now back on the 8 track. It's still kind of hard. But I'm now going to build everything that I can in D8. Now, is anyone here still building in Drupal 7? Lots of hands going up. For the reasons I'm talking about, or any other reasons? Speed of development? Like, it does take a bit longer with 8.
Like sometimes you just stick with them because it's a pain just to upgrade sometimes.
Yep.
Just a pure business thing. Sometimes clients are happy with what they have, so you don't go for an upgrade.
Yep. And Drupal 7 should stick around for a while. But what I've seen with other versions is the modules that are still important to you in 7. You see the updates and the bug fixes slowing down and becoming less frequent, and the next thing you know, it's not happening anymore, and you're thinking, oh. So at some point, you kind of get forced to move. But yeah. And I think the other thing is, and again, I saw this in I had watched lots of fun watching videos of this. I saw a Philadelphia web meetup where they got WebChick to talk to them over Google Hangouts. And she made this comment that if you're looking for the module that you need to build a Drupal, to allow you to go forward to Drupal 8, and it's still in dev or it's in alpha or whatever, and you're not comfortable with that, then you stop. So you've got to be comfortable with the idea that you're going to be using pre-release or dev versions, because sometimes that's the only way you're going to work. Now, I've kind of been like that with Drupal 7 for a while, because a lot of modules were getting some great patches applied, but only to dev, and they were never being upgraded to the next release. So you live with it, and you know that there's a potential risk. You assess that, and then you keep your eye out for problems. So that's my approach with Drupal 8, is just keep doing that. So when should you switch? And I know some people are looking at it now, and some people aren't. Well, I'd say if you're not looking at it now, then you should be, if you are sticking with Drupal 8. But it's obviously up to you. But if you're going to, what's next? Well, we come along to what I have seen and experienced as a typical upgrade skill process for Drupal, one version to the next. What's new, different or better, and is it enough to make me move? Did all my modules get migrated or ported yet? How do I do X? For example, disabling the site name in the header. I spent 15 minutes trying to figure that out. I thought there's a setting somewhere that I haven't found. Turns out it's in a block. If you want to turn off the site name of your site, it's in a block, not the theme. I guess that makes sense to somebody. And you can't disable a module anymore, you uninstall it. Just like, whoa. If I uninstall web form, am I losing all my web forms in the process? Actually, no. No, you have to delete them yourself, because it doesn't let you uninstall it until you delete them, because there are dependencies. And all the submissions. Kind of, okay. So you could just hug the tree a little bit longer. Drupal 7 is still better in some respects. Module support, the speed of site building, and some of Drupal 8 is still undercooked. It's going to be supported for a long time to come, although I've touched on that one already. Or you could just procrastinate for a bit longer. You know, it's a steep learning curve with Drupal 8. I'm not ready. Switching will take me time. I'm not sure how much time. What if I get halfway through a project and hit a wall and just can't go forward and then have to go back to Drupal 7? For me, I think the sooner you start, the more time you're going to need to invest. And the longer you wait, the better Drupal 8 will be, and easier too, but you're still going to have to go through a learning curve at some point. So even if you just figure out how to use Composer and just do, I don't know, Composer require Thunder or Composer require Lightning, which are a couple of distributions that come fully ready to go with specific end goals in mind, you can then go and play around with the Drupal site and see how they did it, and then steal from them. A friend of mine used to say, better brilliantly stolen than badly invented. Or you could just jump ship altogether. When I was thinking about this presentation, I was like, oh, I'm looking after some WordPress sites for people now, and you know, it doesn't seem as bad as I thought. Maybe I'll just jump. And I thought, no. Woke up. You could go to Squarespace. Dries thinks now that if you're in the brochureware site business, you should just be using something like Squarespace or Weebly or Wix or whatever. He says that's for SaaS vendors. That low-end, small site, not necessarily small site, depends on the digital experience you want people to have, because Drupal might still be the best for a small site. Shopify, if you're doing e-commerce. Backdrop, perceptions of Backdrop, what do people think of it? Have you tried it? Yeah? Briefly?
I think it's a good way forward if you don't want to get out.
Yep, as long as everything's there for you. There's a ton of modules that still haven't migrated.
I'm a PMC manager.
Sorry?
I'm a PMC. I'm married and published
Okay. Yeah, so what are you building with it, or are you still?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I like the look of it, but I thought, well, Drupal 7 ain't broke enough for me to jump over here, and I figure I am going to go to 8. So, or something else. So you could do what I suggested, dip your toe in the water and try distribution. So I've had a look at Lightning. I didn't do Thunder, and I did Commerce. But all of them essentially say use Composer. But if you can get to a command line on your server and you can type Composer require and then the name of the project. And you'll notice that whenever you look at the releases in Drupal now for a site, they all have the composer command you need to use if you want to add that module to your Drupal instance. So you can get these and they install and they're ready to go. So they come configured with a lot of the hard work done, which I think is good. And then you can go and play and figure out, really, are you ready to start using it? But you might see some things being done that you were thinking you needed another module for that wasn't ready yet, and then see that actually somebody solved the problem in another way. And I've done a little bit of that myself. So I guess heading towards a summary, where does that leave us? Because I think I'm almost out of time. If you're a site builder that's been holding off, now is probably a good time. I think Drupal 8 is ready for most purposes, and you're going to have to hit the learning curve at some point, so you may as well just get on with it. Drupal 8 to Drupal 9 and beyond have a long life with hopefully no more bumps in the road like we saw going to 7 and 8. That's what we see with the 6 monthly releases. The idea with Drupal 9 is that when we get to that, they'll essentially say some of this Drupal 8 stuff is being deprecated and removed, and now we're moving forward with 9. But the leap from 8 to 9 won't be like it was from 7 to 8. So for me, that isn't in itself a reason to invest my time in Drupal now, because I know that I'm going to still be building websites in 5 years using skills I'm learning today, whereas some of the skills I used in Drupal 7 won't be so useful anymore. So I think it's an investment in your future. You get to keep playing with some of the best web technology around, and I quite like playing with Drupal. It's my favourite thing. Well, not quite, but one of my more favourite things. So that's it. Thank you for listening. Hopefully that was all right. Are there any questions?
Thank you. So the first, it's two parts of the question. The first question is, how the site builder deals with patches?
Well, there's a composer way.
Let's say Drupal before Composer.
Okay, in Drupal 7, or what I might still do now is I would download a patch and then just apply it at the command line.
Patch dash
Yeah,
P1.
exactly. That's how I do it. Yeah. But I'm honest and say I don't think I'm the site builder I described earlier. If you're a site builder, then you do see conversations in issue queues and in places like Drupal Answers where people say, I can't apply a patch, what do I do? Maybe your hosting company would do it for you, I don't know. Some of them will, some of them won't. They'll go, no, it's your code, mate. I'm not touching it.
So basically, the question is how the site builder is dealing with patches.
Yep.
So now we're talking about Composer.
Mm-hmm.
So now, sometimes when you hit into a bump where you can't use Drush, you'll need to use Composer.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a nice way to talk to site builders is maybe when they know what is really in them for Composer. For example, for Composer, when you want to reapply, for example, your modules, it can really apply. You can really log all of your patches,
Mm-hmm.
and it will reapply it for you
By
itself. For example, maybe that's a way just.
Yeah, I think the real challenge if you're a site builder is, are you going to now find a way to get into the command line, become familiar with it, and learn Composer, and get Drush installed and learn that as well? I mean, Drush still has a role. You've got the Drupal console now as an alternative to Drush, and to do other things, which I've not had a lot of success with so far. Drush is still usable. I mean, Composer doesn't downloads your models. It doesn't actually install them for you. So you still need something to do that. So you can go to the UI, or you can use a Drush command. But I've got a feeling that we're going to lose site builders just because they don't want to touch the command line.
It all depends if you're using a version control system or not. Because if you're not, you just delete the folder, extract the new one, and that's it.
Yeah. So the comment there was that if you're not using a version control system, then but you've got to have access to the folder. So I guess you're going into File Manager on cPanel or maybe Terminal and doing stuff and burning your whole site and then realizing afterwards that exactly.
Thanks, David. Tom here. was wondering, I thought you made a really good point about site builders sort of acting as a bridge to content editors, if you like, or clients that are low content. And I really think that's a good point, that we don't want to lose that bridge. Because, so what I was wondering was, from your perspective as a site builder, what do you think it is that Drupal could be doing better? So, for example, from a site editor's perspective, like what are things that you see in your daily life that you kind of feel could be better?
Well, I think we're seeing some of the things I would say being addressed. CK editor in core is good. I mentioned the in-place editing, which I'm not convinced by, because I think that's some people will like it, but media is huge. We need media in core with the functionality being talked about. I think the entity browser is sounding pretty promising, although I've not had a play with that yet. But I think, yeah, I'm mostly happy with what I can do, even in Drupal 8. I wouldn't mind figuring out how to get rid of that panel on the side so that I can use the full width of the screen, because field groups don't look so nice when they're squished in. But, that's not a huge deal for me. But I think the key is making it so that when somebody logs into Drupal that they can do what they need to do pretty easily. And that's why I love it, partly. I can write help underneath fields so people know what to do next, instead of just, oh, there's a field called it, and they have no idea what to do. So being able to customize that for the project, explaining to somebody, oh, you need to upload an image here that is this size, otherwise it'll break the slideshow, stuff like that. So I think it's just non-site builders being aware that these are things we do, and that our customers, and whether they be internal or external customers, need to have for them. All right?
Cool.
All right?
Yeah, perfect.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone.